The box was heavy in my hands, but my heart was light. It was a cake, the most extravagant one I could find, a rich, dark chocolate torte piled high with fresh, glistening strawberries, just like the ones I used to buy for her when she was small. $200. People might gasp at that, but for my Rebecca, for my only child on her 45th birthday, no price was too high. The memory of her 6-year-old self, her face smeared with chocolate, beaming up at me as if I'd hung the moon, played in my mind as I stood on her pristine doorstep. Quick pause. Before we continue, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe, because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing. I even had the candles ready, tucked safely in my purse. I was so eager to see that light in her eyes again, that pure, unadulterated joy. I knocked, a hopeful smile already on my face. The door swung open, and there she was. But the woman who stood before me was a stranger. Her eyes, the same shade of hazel as her father's, didn't sparkle. They were flat, annoyed. She didn't even look at me, really. Her gaze went straight past me, to the street, to anywhere else. "Oh, it's you," she muttered, the words dripping with a weariness that felt like a physical blow. I forced my smile to stay put, a fragile shield against the sudden chill. "Happy birthday, my love," I said, my voice perhaps a little too bright. I held out the cake box like an offering. "I brought your favorite, chocolate with strawberries, just like when you were a kid." Rebecca let out a sigh so deep it seemed to come from the soles of her feet. It was the sound of someone bearing an unbearable burden. And that burden, I was beginning to understand, was me. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, her voice dry and devoid of warmth. She turned and walked inside, leaving me to follow, without a thank you, without a second glance at the cake. I stepped into the beautiful, spacious living room of the house I had given her. This very house. The down payment, $50,000, was money I had pulled from my life savings, penny by penny, shift by double shift, over 40 years of nursing. I remembered the feel of the check in my hand, the way I'd smiled as I signed it, thinking it was the best investment I could ever make. An investment in her happiness. We sat on her expensive sofa, and I placed the cake box on the glass coffee table. It seemed absurdly out of place now. "You know, Mom," Rebecca began, that new, cold voice of hers slicing through the silence. It was a voice she'd perfected over the last few years, one I still hadn't gotten used to. "I've been thinking a lot about my birthday, about presents, about what would truly make me happy." My heart gave a little leap. This was it. This was the moment she'd let me back in. I leaned forward, nodding enthusiastically. "Of course, my love. Tell me what you want, and I'll get it for you. A trip? Some jewelry? That new car you mentioned last month." She looked at me then, finally met my eyes, and what I saw in them chilled me to the very marrow of my bones. It was pure, undiluted contempt. "The one thing I'd love most as a birthday present," she said slowly, deliberately, savoring each syllable as if it were a fine wine, "is for you to just die." The world stopped. I literally felt the air leave my lungs. It was as if she had reached into my chest, wrapped her fingers around my heart, and ripped it out. Her words didn't just hang in the air, they echoed, looping over and over in a nightmarish soundtrack inside my head. "Die, die, die, my daughter, my own flesh and blood." The child I had carried for 9 months, had nursed through fevers, had read to every night, had loved with a ferocity that defied reason, had just wished for my death as a gift. What? The word was a ragged whisper, torn from a place of profound shock. I could feel the hot sting of tears welling up, blurring her impassive face. "What did you just say?" You heard me, she continued, her voice a glacier, each word a shard of ice, cutting deep. I'm tired of you, Mom. Tired of your constant calls, your unexpected visits, of you always being here, bothering me. My life would be so much easier, so much happier, if you would just disappear. My hands, resting in my lap, began to shake uncontrollably. 72 years of life. 45 years of being her mother. In all that time, through all the struggles and joys, I had never ever imagined I would hear those words from her lips. Rebecca, I managed between the sobs I could no longer hold back. I'm your mother. I've given you everything. I've sacrificed everything for you. Exactly. She interrupted, standing up from the sofa as if she could no longer bear to be on the same level as me. And that's why you're suffocating me. I can't breathe with your constant presence. I need freedom. I need you to let me live my life without your drama and your emotional needs. The $200 cake sat between us, the candles in my purse now feeling like a pathetic joke. Every dream I had for that day, the hugs, the laughter, blowing out candles. Maybe a family dinner with her, David and the twins vanished into smoke, leaving nothing but the acrid smell of burning dreams. But honey, I tried one more time, my voice trembling as badly as my hands. I just want to be close to you, to be a part of your life. You're all I have. And that's exactly the problem, she replied, crossing her arms over her chest, a final, unbreachable barrier. The fact that I'm all you have, it's pathetic. Go get a life of your own and leave me alone. I stood up, my legs feeling like they were made of water. I picked up the cake box, its weight now symbolic of the unbearable burden of my love. I can't believe you're saying this to me, I murmured, more to myself than to her. After everything I've done for you. Everything you've done? She let out a short, sarcastic laugh. Mom, everything you've done has been for your own benefit. To feel needed, to have control over my life. But newsflash, I'm not a little girl anymore. I walked toward the door, each step an agony, feeling as if I were aging years with every movement. As my hand touched the cool brass of the doorknob, I turned for one last look. One final, desperate search for a flicker of regret in her eyes. A glimpse of the sweet little girl who used to crawl into my lap and tell me I was her best friend. But I saw nothing of the sort. All I saw was impatience. A raw, palpable desire for me to be gone, to leave so she could finally celebrate her birthday free from the nuisance I represented. Happy birthday, Rebecca, I murmured, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. And I walked out of that house, closing the door softly behind me. I didn't know it then, but that simple click of the latch was the sound of the old me, the sacrificing, ever hopeful mother, being locked away forever. I carried the cake to my car, drove to my small, modest apartment on the other side of town, and went inside. The $200 masterpiece, with its now melted candles, went straight into the kitchen trash. I watched it disappear beneath a coffee filter and some eggshells, the strawberries looking like a grotesque wound against the dark chocolate. Then I collapsed onto my old sofa, the same sofa where I had nursed Rebecca as a baby, where I had read her countless stories, where I had cried tears of happiness every time she achieved something new. The sobs came then, great, heaving waves of them, racking my entire body. How had it come to this? How could the child I had carried in my womb, the center of my universe for 45 years, wish for my death with such stunning coldness? The question echoed in the silent apartment, a ghost haunting the ruins of my heart. And as I sat there in the deepening twilight, surrounded by the ghosts of our happier past, I began to remember, not just the pain of today, but everything, Absolutely everything. The tears felt like they would never end. They were a torrential rain washing over the parched earth of my spirit, each one carrying a memory, a sacrifice, a piece of the life I thought we had built together. I sat in the growing darkness, not bothering to turn on a lamp. The faint glow from the streetlights outside cast long, distorted shadows across the living room, making the familiar contours of my home feel alien and menacing. My mind, against my will, became a relentless projector, flashing images of a different Rebecca. I saw her at 3 years old, her small body burning with fever, struggling for every breath as pneumonia gripped her tiny lungs. The doctor had been clear. She needed a specific, powerful antibiotic that our insurance wouldn't cover. $1,200, an impossible sum for a single mother working as a nurse. I remembered the gut-wrenching feeling of selling my own mother's emerald brooch, the last tangible piece of her I owned. The cold feel of the cash in my hand, the warmth of the pharmacist's smile as he handed me the medicine that saved her life. I would have sold my soul, and I practically did. The memory shifted. She was 16, twirling in front of my full-length mirror, a vision in a blush-pink taffeta dress. It cost $800. I had worked every weekend for 4 months picking up extra shifts, covering for colleagues, my own feet aching, my own body begging for rest to buy it for her. The way her eyes had sparkled, rivaling the sequins on the bodice. "Thank you, Mom," she had squealed, throwing her arms around my neck. "You're the best in the whole world." The scent of her perfume, something sweet and youthful, lingered in the memory. Where was that girl? What had happened to her? Then came college, 3 changes in her major. Each shift meant another semester, another tuition payment. $42,000 in total. I had taken out a second mortgage on this very apartment, this small sanctuary that was all I had left. "Don't worry, honey," I'd tell her every time she called me in tears, overwhelmed by her latest academic crisis. "Your education is the most important thing. We'll figure it out." And we did. I figured it out by signing my name on a dotted line, shackling myself to decades more of debt. Her wedding. My beautiful princess. She wanted the elegant ballroom at the Grand Hotel, the cascading orchids, the 5-tiered cake, the live band. $35,000. I signed check after check, my hand cramping, but my heart soaring. I want my princess to have everything. I told the florist, the caterer, the band leader. I beamed with a pride that felt like it would burst from my chest. Seeing her walk down the aisle, her hand tucked into David's arm, I thought, this is it. This is the happiness I worked for. And then the house, this very house where she had just eviscerated me. When they found their dream home, the down payment was a staggering $150,000. It was my entire retirement nest egg, the money I had scrimped and saved for 40 years, the cushion that was supposed to let me travel, to finally rest. "Don't you worry about a thing," I told them, my voice full of a confidence I didn't feel. "I'll take care of the down payment." I handed over my future, and they handed me a key to a house I would never truly be welcome in. It didn't stop. The twins arrived, and I became the permanent, on-call, free babysitter. Any night they wanted a date, any weekend they needed a break, I was there. I canceled my own plans with friends. I said no to a potential romance with a kind man from my book club. My life revolved around their schedule, and I was happy to do it. Happy to help my daughter have the life she dreamed of. When David lost his job last year, the panic in their voices was a palpable thing over the phone. "Mom, we don't know what we're going to do." So, I did what I always did. I paid their mortgage. For 8 months, $16,000, pulled directly from my pension. Money that meant my own grocery budget shrunk to rice, beans, and whatever was on sale. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself that's what family does. And just 6 months ago, the twins needed braces, another $4,000. I saw the worry on their faces, the stress of another financial burden. "Don't you worry," I said, my voice soothing. Maternal. That's what grandparents are for. I wrote the check, feeling a sense of purpose. I was needed. I was useful. A bitter, hollow laugh escaped my lips, startling me in the silent room. Useful. What a fool I had been. A useful, walking wallet. A useful, free babysitter. A useful, emotional punching bag. The tears had stopped. In their place was a cold, hard knot in my stomach. A clarity I hadn't experienced in years, maybe ever, began to cut through the fog of my grief. I stood up, my legs still unsteady, but now from a different kind of shock. I walked to the small, oak desk in the corner of the room, a relic from a different era. This was where I kept my records, not out of mistrust, but out of a strange sense of pride. The receipts, the bank statements, the copies of checks, they were my trophies. Proof of a mother's love, quantified in dollars and cents. Now I pulled them out, boxes and boxes of them. I spread them across the floor, a paper trail of my own destruction. I found a notepad and a pen, and I began to do the math. The numbers, once a source of pride, now felt like accusations. From birth to adulthood, approximately $200,000. College, $42,000. The wedding, $35,000. The house down payment, $150,000. The mortgage payments, $16,000. The twins' braces, $4,000. Asterisk birthdays, Christmases. Random gifts over 45 years, at least $10,000 more. Asterisk my hand trembled as I added the final column. The total was a physical blow. Over $460,000. Almost $500,000. I had poured almost $500,000 into my daughter's happiness, and all I had to show for it was a wish for my own death. Tears fell again, but they were different now. They weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of pure, undiluted rage. They splashed onto the papers, blurring the ink, the numbers that told the story of my life. If I had invested that money, even conservatively, I would have over $600,000 today. I could be living in a beautiful seaside cottage. I could have traveled to Paris, to Rome, to see the northern lights. I could have had a retirement of comfort and peace. Instead of counting pennies in this tiny apartment, worrying about how to make my pension last. But no, I had chosen to invest in love. I had chosen to believe that every dollar spent on Rebecca was a dollar well spent, that every sacrifice was worth it because, in the end, I would have a daughter who loved me, who would be there for me in my old age. I had built my entire life on a foundation of sand, and with one cruel sentence, she had washed it all away. How spectacularly foolish I had been. I picked up my phone, my fingers numb. I needed to hear her voice one more time. I needed the final, brutal confirmation. I dialed her number, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. It rang 5 times before she answered. "What do you want now, Mom?" The annoyance was a living thing slithering down the line. "Rebecca," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm inside me. "I need to know if you really meant what you said to me today." "Of course I meant it," she replied without a heartbeat of hesitation. There was not a single note of remorse. "Mom, it's time for you to understand that I need space. Your obsession with me isn't healthy." "Obsession?" I repeated the word, tasting its bitterness. "You call a mother's love an obsession?" Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So, if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. "Yes, exactly that," she said, her voice crisp and final. "And I hope that after today you finally get the message. I need you to respect my boundaries and let me live my life." I hung up the phone without saying goodbye. There were no more words. There was no misunderstanding. My daughter truly believed my love was a burden. My presence in her life was a problem to be solved. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, replaying every beautiful moment we had ever shared. Every "I love you, Mom," every hug, every laugh. Had it all been a lie? A performance until she no longer needed me? Or had I, through my constant giving, somehow created a monster of entitlement, a woman so selfish she could no longer see beyond her own needs? At 3:0 amperes m. As the first faint light of dawn began to tinge the horizon, something inside me broke. But it wasn't a breaking into pieces. It was a breaking open. The all-consuming sadness began to recede, and in its place, something new began to flow. It was anger, yes, a righteous, burning fury. But it was more than that. It was indignation. It was the clear, cold understanding that I had been used. I had been manipulated, and I had been discarded like a used tissue. My daughter wanted me to die. Well, I thought, a strange calm settling over me. Maybe it was time to give her exactly what she asked for. The sunrise that morning was not a gentle awakening, it was a verdict. Pale, cold light spilled into my apartment, illuminating the paper carnage I had spread across my floor. The receipts and statements were no longer trophies, they were evidence, a damning ledger of a lifetime of love, now weaponized by the clarity of my new reality. I didn't feel tired. The sleepless night had sanded my nerves raw, but it had also scoured away the last vestiges of delusion. A strange, hyper-focused energy coursed through me. The tears were gone, the shaking had stopped. In their place was a mental sharpness I hadn't possessed in years, a single-minded determination that made the world seem incredibly clear. I made a pot of strong coffee, the bitter aroma a fitting companion to my mood. I carried the mug back to the living room and knelt amidst the proof of my financial demise. This wasn't about sadness anymore. This was an audit, a forensic examination of where I had gone wrong. I started with the oldest documents, my fingers tracing the faded ink. There was the receipt for the $1,200 in antibiotics. I could still feel the weight of my mother's brooch in my hand, the finality of handing it to the jeweler. I had told myself it was just an object, that Rebecca's life was all that mattered. But now, I allowed myself to feel the loss, not just of the brooch, but of the connection to my own mother, a tie I had severed to save my daughter. Had Rebecca ever known? Had she ever cared? Then, the prom dress. The $800 price tag stared back at me. I closed my eyes and was back in the hospital break room, eating a dry sandwich I'd brought from home, my feet throbbing in my worn-out shoes after a 16-hour shift. I remembered the exhaustion, a deep bone weariness that felt permanent. But then, I'd picture her face, and it would all feel worth it. Now, that memory was tainted. Had she ever truly appreciated the cost, not just in dollars, but in my sweat, my time, my youth? The college tuition statements were a chronicle of my own deferred dreams. $42,000. The second mortgage had felt like a noose around my neck for a decade. Every time the payment felt like a struggle, I'd recall her voice on the phone, trembling with anxiety about an exam. "Don't worry, honey. Your education is the most important thing." I had sacrificed my own financial security for her fleeting academic passions, for a degree she barely used. The weight of that foolishness pressed down on me, a physical force. I moved to the wedding invoices. $35,000. I could still see the florist's face, a mask of sympathy and greed, as I signed off on the extravagant, orchid arrangements. "She only gets married once," I had said, a mantra I used to justify every check. But looking at the receipts now, for the 5-tiered cake, the string quartet, the open bar, I saw not a celebration of love, but a pageant of my own desperation. I was buying her a perfect day, hoping it would somehow cement my place in her perfect life. The biggest stack was for the house, the $150,000 withdrawal from my retirement account. That one still took my breath away. I had handed over my safety net, my freedom, the reward for 4 decades of thankless work. I had consigned myself to a future of financial anxiety, so she could have a walk-in closet and a granite countertop, and she had told me to die in that very house. The irony was so profound it was almost beautiful. The more recent documents were just as painful. The $16,000 for their mortgage. I remembered the taste of rice and beans, week after week, the careful calculations at the grocery store. I had hidden my own struggle from them, putting on a brave face. "It's no trouble at all," I'd said. "We're family." And the $4,000 for the twins' braces. I had seen it as an investment in their future, in their confidence. Now, I saw it as just another withdrawal from the bottomless bank of Grandma. I began to add the numbers again, more carefully this time. I factored in the interest I had lost, the compound growth that $500,000 could have achieved. The final figure was devastating. It was more than money. It was time. It was energy. It was 1,000 small joys I had denied myself. It was the trip to Ireland my own mother had always dreamed of taking me on. It was the little cottage by the sea I'd sketched in a notebook as a young woman. It was peace of mind. A cold, hard resolve solidified within me. This was not just about heartbreak. This was a financial crime scene, and I was the victim. The kind, forgiving, self-sacrificing Julietta had died in that living room last night. The woman rising from this paper-strewn floor was someone new. Someone who understood the value of $1 because she had given too many away. Someone who finally recognized that love should not require self-annihilation. I got up, my joints protesting, and went to my small kitchen. I poured the rest of my coffee down the drain. It was time for something stronger. I opened a bottle of red wine I'd been saving for a special occasion, though for whose occasion I couldn't even remember. I poured a generous glass. This, I decided, was occasion enough. A toast to the end of one life and the beginning of another. As I sipped the rich, dark wine, I made a plan. It wasn't a plan of revenge, not exactly. It was a plan of reclamation. A plan of justice. If my presence was so burdensome, then I would remove it. But I would not simply fade away into a lonely, penniless old age. I would take back what was mine. I would reclaim every penny, every piece of my life that I had so foolishly entrusted to her. First, I would need to be methodical. I would start with the easiest, most accessible assets. The joint account I kept for their emergencies. Then I would leverage my legal position on the mortgage. I would change my will, my insurance, every document that bore her name. I would systematically dismantle the financial infrastructure I had built for her, brick by brick. I thought of Rebecca's face, the cold impatience, the utter lack of remorse. A part of me, the old mother, wondered if I was being too harsh. But then I heard her voice, clear as day. The one thing I'd love most is for you to just die. No, harsh was wishing your mother dead. What I was planning was merely consequence. I finished my wine, the warmth spreading through my chest, fueling my determination. I gathered all the papers, all the evidence of my lifelong folly, and placed them neatly back in their boxes. They were no longer memories to mourn. They were a blueprint for my liberation. I walked to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. The woman who stared back had eyes I barely recognized. They were older, yes, lined with the cares of 72 years. But they were no longer soft with pleading. They were sharp, clear, resolute. The grief was still there, a deep, permanent scar on my soul, but it was now buried under layers of steel. My daughter had wanted a ghost. She had wanted me to disappear. What she was going to get was a reckoning. I had a list to make. Not a list of sacrifices, but a list of targets. And I would start first thing in the morning. The world thought Julietta Johnson was a kind, gentle, retiring old woman. It was time to show them just how formidable a retired nurse with a broken heart and a ledger full of grievances could be. The sadness had given way to strategy. The love had been replaced by logic. And for the first time in 45 years, I was going to put myself first. The morning air felt different as I stepped outside. It was crisper, charged with a new purpose. I was dressed, not in my usual soft, forgiving sweaters, but in a tailored suit I hadn't worn in a decade. The wool felt stiff and authoritative against my skin. A costume for the role I was about to play, a woman not to be trifled with. The scent of my own perfume, a floral note I usually found too bold, now seemed like a declaration of war. My first stop was the bank. Not my usual branch, but the main downtown office where the transactions were larger and the anonymity greater. The joint account for Rebecca's household emergencies held $20,000. $20,000 I had deposited just in case. A silent insurance policy against their instability. Now, I saw it for what it was. My money, languishing in an account for a daughter who considered my existence an emergency. The bank was a temple of quiet efficiency. Marble floors echoed with the hushed footsteps of people guarding their secrets and their wealth. I approached the manager's desk. Mr. Martinez, a man who had watched my financial history unfold for 20 years, looked up from his computer. His smile was warm, familiar. "Mrs. Johnson," he greeted, standing. "It's good to see you. How can I help you today?" The words felt like stones in my mouth, heavy and final. "Good morning, Mr. Martinez. I want to close joint account number 458728991. His smile faltered, replaced by professional concern. He adjusted his glasses, his fingers tapping rapidly on his keyboard. "Are you sure? That account has a considerable balance of $20,000. He peered at me over the rim of his glasses, a silent question in his eyes. "Is everything all right with Rebecca?" I met his gaze steadily, my own face a polite mask. Inside, my heart was a trip hammer, but my voice was unnervingly calm. "Completely sure. I want to transfer all of that money to my personal savings account immediately." I could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. He knew me as the generous mother, the reliable depositor, the woman who always put her family first. This act was a fundamental rewrite of that story. But professionalism won out. He slid a series of forms across the polished wood. "Of course, Mrs. Johnson, if you could just sign here and here." My hand did not shake as I signed my name. The pen felt powerful in my grasp. Each signature was a stitch closing a wound, a suture on the bleeding heart of the old Julieta. I watched as he processed the transfer, the numbers on his screen shifting, the digital representation of my loyalty being withdrawn. "All done," he said, a note of finality in his voice. "The funds are now in your personal account." A surge of pure, unadulterated satisfaction washed through me, so potent it was almost dizzying. It was a feeling I hadn't experienced in years, the feeling of taking something back for myself. It was only $20,000, a fraction of what I'd given, but it was a start. It was a symbol. "Thank you, Mr. Martinez," I said, my smile now genuine, though he would never understand its true meaning. He interpreted it as kindness. It was, in fact, the cool smile of vengeance served at room temperature. My next stop was the mortgage loan office. This was a more complex battlefield. During the year David was unemployed, I had co-signed their mortgage. It was an act of ultimate trust, a signature that bound my financial future to theirs. At the time, Rebecca had wept with gratitude. "Thank you, Mom. I don't know what we'd do without you. You're our savior." David had promised, his hand on his heart, that they would never miss a payment. But that signature also gave me rights. And rights, I was learning, were a form of power. The loan officer, Miss Williams, was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s. Her handshake was firm, her demeanor all business. "Mrs. Johnson," she greeted, gesturing for me to sit. "What brings you here today?" "I want to review the mortgage contract, where I appear as a co-signer." I explained, my voice level. "I need to understand exactly what my rights and obligations are." As she turned to her filing cabinet, my mind drifted back to the day I'd signed those papers. The air had been thick with their relief. I had felt needed, essential, the matriarch holding the family fortress together. Now, I saw the truth. I wasn't the foundation of their home. I was the load-bearing wall they took for granted, until the day they decided to renovate and knock me down. "Here are the documents, miss," Williams said, placing a thick folder between us. "As a co-signer, you are equally responsible for the payments if the primary holders cannot make them." She paused, her eyes meeting mine. "But you also have certain rights to reclaim the property or assert your position if you believe the debtors lack financial stability." "Exactly," I completed, my fingers tracing the dense legal text. I understood every word. What would I have to do if I decided to exercise those rights? She leaned forward slightly, her professional curiosity piqued. "Is there a problem with the payments?" "I'm evaluating the situation," I replied, my tone giving nothing away. It was the truth. I was evaluating the entire structure of our relationship, and I had found it unsound. "You would have to demonstrate a risk of default or that there have already been significant delays," she explained. "In your case." She scanned the screen. "I see that you covered 8 months of payments last year. That, in itself, is sufficient evidence of financial instability on the part of the primary holders." A slow, cold smile spread across my face, one I hid by looking down at the papers. Perfect. Rebecca, in her panic about David losing his job again last week, had called me. She thought she was laying the groundwork for another bailout. Instead, she had handed me the final piece of evidence I needed. She had given me the weapon herself. "I see," I said, making a show of carefully reading a clause. "Thank you for your clarity, Miss Williams. May I have a copy of these documents?" "Of course." I left her office with the copies secured in my leather bag, the weight of them a comfort. The sun was higher in the sky now, warming the city streets. People rushed past me, consumed by their own dramas. None of them knew that the elderly woman in the sensible heels had just declared a silent, financial war. I stopped at a small park and sat on a bench, the folder on my lap. I wasn't just holding mortgage papers. I was holding the deed to my daughter's illusion of independence. I was holding the key to the house I had bought, the house where I was no longer welcome. The first cuts had been made. The joint account was closed, the money safely back in my possession. The legal groundwork for reclaiming the house had been laid. The process was no longer a vague fantasy. It was in motion. A strange peace settled over me. The chaotic storm of emotions from the previous day had coalesced into this single, focused path. There was no more ambiguity, no more wondering if I was overreacting. The path forward was as clear as the text in the mortgage agreement. I had given Rebecca life. I had given her a childhood, an education, a wedding, a home. And in return, she had given me a sentence: "I wish you would just die." Well, I was not going to die, but the mother she had known and exploited was gone. Today, I had begun to bury her, and with every signature, every transferred dollar, I was tossing a shovelful of dirt on the grave. The old Julietta would have felt guilty. She would have worried about what Rebecca would do for emergencies now, how they would manage. The new Julietta simply closed her bag, stood up, and walked on. Their emergencies were no longer mine to solve. Their problem, as my daughter had so succinctly put it, was me. And I was finally starting to solve it. The law offices of Annelle Adams smelled of old books, rich leather, and faint traces of pipe tobacco, a scent that had always been a comforting constant, a link to my late husband, his oldest friend. But today, the familiarity was a backdrop for the unfamiliar territory I was about to chart. I sat in the high-backed client chair, my posture rigid, the leather bag containing my evidence resting on my knees like a shield. Annelle, a robust man of 70 with a full head of silver hair and eyes that had seen every shade of human folly, greeted me with warm perplexity. "Julietta," he said, settling into his own worn chair, "what brings you to my office? It's not common to see you here." His gaze was sharp, missing nothing, including the uncharacteristic severity of my suit and the grim set of my mouth. "Annelle," I began, my voice steady, a stark contrast to the tremor I felt deep in my soul. "I need your help with something very important. I want to completely change my will." His bushy silver eyebrows shot up towards his hairline. The surprise was genuine. We both knew the existing will left everything, down to the last paperclip, to Rebecca. It had been a given, a mother's final act of devotion. "Has something happened with Rebecca?" he asked, his tone shifting from friendly to professionally concerned. And so, I told him. I didn't weep. I didn't raise my voice. I laid out the facts with the chilling precision of a coroner's report. I recounted the birthday cake, the cold reception, the way she let me into the house I had bought. I repeated her words verbatim, each one dropping into the quiet room like a shard of glass. "The one thing I'd love most is for you to just die." I described the pure contempt in her eyes, the impatience for me to leave, the phone call where she confirmed it all, and called my love an obsession. Arnold listened in utter silence, his expression growing graver with each detail. He didn't interrupt. He simply absorbed the narrative of my annihilation. When I finished, the room felt heavy with the weight of my story. "Julietta," he said finally, his voice a low rumble of disbelief and anger. "I am so sorry. I am so deeply sorry you had to endure that. I never thought. After everything you've done for that girl. He shook his head, a gesture of profound disappointment. I watched you work yourself to the bone for her. I helped you structure the loan for her house, for God's sake. Neither did I, Nell. I sighed, the sound carrying the ghost of my exhaustion. But I've made my decision. I want to change my will and leave everything to the Orphans Foundation. I had volunteered there for years, finding solace in caring for children who truly had no one. It felt like a righteous, poetic justice. I also want to set up a trust fund for my grandchildren, but Rebecca cannot have any access to that money, not a single cent, until they turn 25. That can be done. And Nell nodded, already pulling out a fresh legal pad and beginning to take notes with a firm, decisive hand. The time for sympathy was over. The time for action had begun. Do you also want to change the beneficiaries of your life insurance? Of course, I said without a flicker of hesitation. Anything with Rebecca's name on it, I want it changed. My daughter wants me to die, but when I do, she's not going to receive a single penny from me. She's made it clear my presence is a burden. She can live with the consequences of my absence. For the next 2 hours, we worked with a grim, focused efficiency. We went through every legal document in my life, the $100,000 life insurance policy, my savings accounts, the deed to my apartment, my small investment portfolio. Every asset that had once been earmarked for my daughter's future was systematically redirected. Each signature I placed was an act of reclamation, a silent scream of defiance. I was disinheriting not just a person, but a past version of myself who believed such sacrifice was noble. There's something else, I said as we were finishing the last of the new documents. My voice was calm, but I could feel the pulse of adrenaline. This was the nuclear option. I want you to prepare all the necessary documents to reclaim the house where Rebecca lives. Anel leaned back, steepling his fingers. His eyes, usually twinkling with humor, were now hard and understanding. As the co-signer of the mortgage, you have rights. And her husband just lost his job again, you said? He did. She told me so herself, probably expecting me to ride to the rescue once more. I allowed a thin, cold smile to touch my lips. She gave me the final piece of evidence I needed. Now I see where you're going with all of this. Anel murmured, a look of grim approval on his face. He was no longer just my late husband's friend, he was my general, and I was laying out a battle plan he could respect. Are you sure you want to go that far, Julieta? It's one thing to change a will. It's another to make your daughter and her family homeless. The word homeless hung in the air. I pictured the twins, their small faces. A pang of something guilt, sorrow tried to surface, but I pushed it down. I thought of the $150,000, my retirement, the security I had given up. I thought of the wish for my death spoken in that very house. Completely sure, I replied, the determination in my voice surprising even me. It was as if a deeper, stronger version of myself was speaking. My daughter told me her life would be easier if I disappeared. Well, I'm going to disappear. But first, I'm going to make sure she understands, in the most tangible way possible, exactly what it means to live without me and without everything I've done for her. She needs to feel the weight of what she's thrown away. Anel held my gaze for a long moment, assessing my resolve. He saw the steel in my eyes, the absence of hysteria, the clear, cold logic of my position. He gave a single, sharp nod. All right, Julieta, I'll draw up the papers. We'll notify the bank and start the process. With David's unstable employment history and your history of covering payments, we have a very strong case. When I left Annelle's office, the late afternoon had bled into evening. The city was lighting up, but I felt no connection to its glittering life. I walked through the streets of my neighborhood feeling renewed, reborn in a baptism of legal ink and shattered illusions. For 45 years, I had lived for Rebecca. I had let her needs dictate my choices, her crises define my days, her approval measure my worth. No more. I arrived back at my apartment, the silence now a welcome companion instead of a mournful ghost. I poured myself a glass of wine, the same bottle from the night before, and stood at my window, looking out at the city where I had lived my entire life. Soon, all of this would be a memory. My daughter had asked for my disappearance as a birthday gift, and I was going to grant it to her in the most spectacular way possible. What Rebecca didn't know, what she couldn't possibly comprehend, was that her cruel wish had not broken me. It had unleashed me, and the storm was just beginning to gather. The days that followed my meeting with Annelle were a study in surreal duality. On the surface, my small apartment was a haven of quiet order. But beneath that calm, I was a general, marshalling her forces, the air crackling with the silent energy of impending departure. I had become a secret, a hidden fault line running directly under my daughter's feet. It was on Wednesday morning that the first tremor came. My phone rang, Rebecca's name flashing on the screen. For one wild, foolish moment, my heart leapt. Perhaps the silence had gotten to her. Perhaps she had replayed those terrible words in her head and felt the first sting of regret. The mother in me, a creature of stubborn hope, stirred weakly. How naive I still was. I answered, my voice carefully neutral. "Hello, Rebecca." "Mom," she began, her tone bypassing any greeting. "No, how are you? No, I've been thinking." It was the voice of someone issuing a work order to a subordinate. "I need you to do me a favor." The audacity was breathtaking. It had been less than a week. The wound was still so fresh, I could almost taste the blood in my mouth, and she was calling as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't wished me into the grave. The coldness in her voice was not the frost of guilt, but the chill of pure entitlement. "What do you need?" I asked, my curiosity a sharp, clinical tool. I wanted to measure the depth of her blindness. "The twins have a presentation at school on Friday, and David and I have an important work dinner. Could you watch them that night?" The irony was so rich it was almost poetic. The same woman who had told me my presence was an unbearable burden was now requesting that presence to facilitate her own life. I was not a person, I was a utility. A resource, available 24/7, to be switched on and off, at her convenience. A strange calm settled over me. This was the moment. The first real test of my new resolve. "I can't," I replied simply. The two words felt like unlocking a pair of heavy manacles. There was a beat of stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears in her brain grinding to a halt. She was not used to this word from me. It was not in our vocabulary. "What do you mean you can't?" she asked, genuine surprise giving her voice a sharp edge. "I have other plans," I said, the lie smooth and effortless. I allowed myself a small, private smile she couldn't see. "What plans could you possibly have?" The condescension was a physical slap. It was the tone she used to dismiss my book club, my volunteer work, my entire existence outside of her. As if at 72, I had forfeited the right to a life of my own. The old Julietta would have crumbled, would have quickly justified her plans to seek approval. The new one felt a flare of righteous fire. "Plans that are none of your business," I replied, my voice still eerily calm. "Find another sitter." "But Mom, I can't get a sitter on such short notice. Besides, since when do you charge me to watch your own grandchildren?" There it was, the master key she had used to unlock my guilt for years. The emotional manipulation, the implication that a good grandmother's love was measured in hours of free labor. But the lock had been changed. "Since you told me that your greatest gift would be for me to die," I answered, my voice dropping, the coldness in it now matching her own. "If you want me to disappear from your life, Rebecca, I'm starting now." The silence that followed was long and thick with her disbelief. Finally, she let out a short, sarcastic laugh. "Seriously? You're going to punish me like you're a little brat?" I thought after a few days the drama would be over. "It's not drama, Rebecca. It's respect for your wish. You wanted me to disappear, so that's what I'll do." "Fine," she snapped, her annoyance crystal clear. "If you want to be that childish, that's on you. But don't come crying later when you're lonely." The line went dead. She had hung up on me. Again. Perfect. The interaction was a gift. It confirmed everything. There was no introspection, no apology. Only indignation that her tool was no longer functioning. Her life was being inconvenienced, and that, to her, was the real crime. That afternoon, I went to the bank and did something I never thought I would. I withdrew $30,000 in cash. The teller counted out the bills with practiced efficiency, and the thick envelope felt both dangerous and powerful in my hands. This was the seed money for my new life. I stored it in my personal safe, a tangible representation of my escape fund. Next, I called the travel agency I had researched. "Good afternoon, this is Julietta Johnson," I said, my voice firm. "I'd like to confirm my one-way flight to Zurich for next Tuesday and the 1-month furnished apartment rental." The agent was cheerful, efficient. The total cost was $5,000. I read out my credit card number without a flicker of hesitation. It was the most expensive and most intelligent investment I had made in years. I was no longer investing in Rebecca's happiness. I was investing in my own. The following morning, Thursday, brought an unexpected knock on my door. I opened it to find David standing there. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, his shoulders slumped. The sight of him, so clearly defeated, sent a complicated pang through me. "Julietta," he said, his voice pleading. "Rebecca told me what happened between you two. I know what she said was wrong, but please, don't do this to our family." I feigned innocence, a skill I was quickly mastering. "Do what, David? Stop helping us. Just withdrawing from our lives like this. The kids need you. We need you." The irony was so profound it was almost laughable. When Rebecca wanted to be rid of me, I was a nuisance. But when they realized the scaffolding of support was being removed, suddenly the structure felt unstable. Suddenly they needed me. "David," I said calmly, leaning against the doorframe. "Your wife was very clear with me. My presence in her life is a burden she no longer wants to bear. I'm just respecting her wishes. But Julietta, you know how Rebecca is when she gets mad." "She didn't mean it." "Oh, she didn't?" I asked, my eyebrow arching. "Because she sounded pretty convincing when she wished for my death as a birthday gift. She confirmed it on the phone. She called my love an obsession." "Those aren't the words of someone who doesn't mean it, David. Those are the words of someone finally telling their truth." He lowered his head, scuffing his shoe on my welcome mat. He had no argument. He knew the truth of his wife's nature better than anyone. Please, he insisted, one last weak attempt. Give me a chance to fix this. I'll talk to her. I'll make her understand how wrong she is. I looked at him, this man I had helped support, whose children I had cared for, and I felt a final, quiet severance. It's too late for that, I replied, my voice soft but absolute. Give my grandchildren a kiss for me. And slowly I closed the door. I heard him stand there for a moment longer, before his footsteps retreated down the hall. The unraveling was complete. The threads of obligation, guilt, and twisted love that had bound me to them for so long had been cut. All that was left was to pack my bags and go. The silence after David's departure was profound. It wasn't the empty silence of loneliness, but the fertile silence of a field after a fire, ready for new growth. My resolve, hardened by Rebecca's call and David's plea, was now an unbreakable substance. The plan was no longer a private fantasy, it was a living, breathing entity, and it needed one more vital component, a witness, an accomplice. That evening, I invited my neighbor Elvira over for coffee. She was a spry 6-8-year-old with a mischievous glint in her eyes and a lifetime of wisdom earned from 30 years as a drama teacher. Over the past 5 years, she had become a quiet confidant, a silent observer of my one-woman charity for Rebecca. She had seen me rush out with bags of expensive groceries for my daughter's family while my own cupboard held canned soup. She had watched me cancel our plans for a movie because Rebecca had an emergency. She never judged, but her knowing look spoke volumes. "Julietta," she said, settling into my sofa with her mug. "You look different these last few days. There's a light in your eyes I haven't seen in years. Has something happened?" The dam broke. I told her everything. I spared no painful detail: the birthday wish, the coldness, the financial tally, the closed bank account, the lawyer's visit, the flight to Switzerland. I laid bare the entire, ugly tapestry of my betrayal and my burgeoning rebellion. Elvira listened, her expressive face shifting from sympathy to shock, and finally to a grim, righteous anger. When I finished, her eyes were glistening. "My God, Julietta," she murmured, setting her coffee down with a sharp click. "I can't believe Rebecca would say something so cruel. After everything, I've watched you. The sacrifices." She shook her head, unable to find words vile enough. "The worst part," I explained, the memory now a cold stone in my stomach, "is that she said it as if it were the most normal thing in the world. As if I were a nuisance in her life that needed to be eliminated." "And you're really going to Switzerland?" she asked, her voice a mixture of awe and concern. "Yes," I replied, the word feeling like a vow. "I've already bought the ticket. I leave on Tuesday." Elvira reached across the sofa and took my hands in her own. They were warm and strong. "You know you have my full support, right? What Rebecca did to you is unforgivable." A wave of relief washed over me. Her belief was a validation I hadn't known I needed. "There's something else, Elvira," I said, lowering my voice as if the walls themselves might be spies for my daughter. "I'm going to need your help with something very important." I laid out the final, crucial piece of the plan. I wanted Rebecca to believe, for a little while at least, that I had truly vanished. Elvira would be the one to discover my empty apartment. She would be the messenger who delivered the news and the letter that would detonate in Rebecca's life. "I'll need you to go to my apartment next Wednesday, after I'm gone," I explained. "Use the spare key. Make it look like you were worried when I didn't answer my phone for 2 days. You'll find a letter on the table, addressed to Rebecca. I need you to take it to her, to tell her you found my place empty, that you're concerned for my well-being." A slow, mischievous smile spread across Elvira's face. It was the smile of a seasoned director who had just been handed the role of a lifetime. "It's brilliant," she murmured. "That ungrateful child is finally going to understand what it means to lose you. The panic, the realization, it's going to be a performance she'll never forget. Will you help me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Of course I will," she said, her eyes sparkling. "In fact, I think it's exactly what Rebecca needs to wake up. Don't you worry, Julieta. I was a drama teacher for 30 years. This is going to be the performance of my life." That night, after Elvira left with my spare keys and a conspiratorial hug, I sat down at my desk to write the most important document of my life. This was not a letter of farewell. It was a manifesto, a reckoning. I wrote and rewrote every sentence, weighing each word for maximum impact. I wanted it to be educational. I wanted it to be a mirror held up to her life, showing her exactly what was about to vanish. "My dear Rebecca," the letter began, "you asked me as a birthday gift to disappear from your life, and I have decided to grant your wish. When you read this letter, I will already be far from here, starting the life I should have lived years ago instead of sacrificing it all for you." I continued, my pen flowing across the page. I did not rant. I did not scream on paper. I documented. I listed, in calm, precise detail, every significant financial contribution I had ever made. The $1,200 for the antibiotics, the $800 for the prom dress, the $42,000 for college, the $35,000 for the wedding, the $150,000 for the house, the $16,000 for the mortgage, the $4,000 for the braces. I attached copies of the most damning receipts. But I didn't stop at the money. I detailed the sacrifices of time and self, the missed opportunities for love and travel, the years of eating cheaply to afford her luxuries, the 3 times I was hospitalized for high blood pressure, and how she had been too busy with a hair appointment, a birthday party, or simply too indifferent to answer the phone. For 45 years, I wrote, I believe that love was measured in sacrifice. You have taught me a different, harder truth. Love should be a dialogue, Rebecca, not a monologue of giving. And respect is the currency that must flow both ways. You have shown me none. I then detailed the legal actions I had taken. The changed will, the canceled life insurance, the revoked access to all financial benefits. And then, the final blow. Along with this letter, you will find the formal notification that, as the co-signer on your mortgage, I am exercising my legal rights due to David's continued job instability. The bank will be in contact regarding the foreclosure process. Your life will be much easier without me, just as you wished, but it will also be much more expensive. I hope it's worth it. The letter spanned 23 pages. It was meticulous, cold, and devastatingly clear. It was the voice of the mother she had killed off, speaking from the grave she had so carelessly dug. As I sealed the envelope, I felt no guilt, only a profound sense of closure. This letter was the period at the end of the sentence of our old relationship. I placed it on my kitchen table, a white rectangle waiting to deliver its thunderclap. On Friday night, as I was packing my most precious belongings into 2 suitcases, photographs, my mother's few remaining pieces of jewelry, my favorite books, my phone rang. Rebecca, I watched her name flash on the screen, a ghost trying to haunt a house that was already empty. I didn't answer. She called 3 more times, the rings sounding increasingly desperate, like the frantic beats of a dying heart. I felt nothing. I had already said everything I needed to say. It was all there, in the 23-page testament on my table. The stage was set. The props were in place. The lead actress was ready for her final exit, and the understudy was prepared to deliver the news that would bring the house down. Sunday was a day of ghosts. I spent it walking through the city of my life, a silent pilgrim to my own past. I stood outside the hospital where I had worked for 40 years, its sterile windows reflecting a sky I no longer felt tethered to. I visited the park where I had pushed a giggling Rebecca on a swing, her small hands trusting in mine. I sat for a moment on a bench outside the church where I had married her father, a lifetime of hope sealed with a kiss. Each location was a headstone in the cemetery of the woman I had been. I was not saying goodbye with sorrow, but with a quiet, final acknowledgement. This life was over. That night, sleep was not a retreat but a waiting room. I lay in the dark, not with nerves or regret, but thrumming with a strange, electric anticipation I hadn't felt since I was a young woman, before marriage, before motherhood, when my life was a blank page of possibilities. At 72, I was feeling it again. The adventure was calling. At 5:0 amperes. On Monday, a soft, precise knock echoed through the empty apartment. Elvira stood there, the dawn at her back, holding a thermos of fresh coffee and wearing a smile of pure, unadulterated conspiracy. Her eyes were bright with the thrill of the mission. "Ready for your great escape?" she asked, winking as she handed me the thermos. "More than ready," I replied, the coffee warming my hands and my resolve. I gestured to my 2 suitcases by the door. They held my condensed life, everything that truly mattered. The rest was just furniture, just things. She held up my spare keys, jangling them softly. "I have them. And I also have the letter for Rebecca and all the legal documents you're leaving on her table." She patted her large, practical handbag. "The script is memorized. The props are ready. We had choreographed everything. Elvira would wait until Wednesday, allowing my absence to become a tangible mystery. She would then go to Rebecca's, a picture of neighborly concern, to deliver the news that I was gone. "Remember," I said as we heard the taxi pull up outside, "you have to act very worried. Tell her I didn't answer the phone for 2 days, that you knocked and I didn't respond, and that when you used the emergency keys, you found the apartment empty and this letter for her on the table." Elvira placed a hand on my arm, her expression turning from mischievous to fiercely protective. "Don't you worry, Julieta. I was a drama teacher for 30 years. It's going to be the performance of my life. Now go. Start living yours." The cab driver loaded my suitcases into the trunk. I took one last look at my apartment, the place that had been my shelter and my prison for 15 years. I felt no nostalgia, only the profound lightness of release. It was as if I were finally stepping out of a cage whose door I had locked myself. "To the airport," the driver confirmed. "To the airport," I said. And as the words left my lips, I felt them mark a border crossing. I was leaving the nation of my daughter and entering the uncharted territory of myself. During the 40-minute ride, I watched my city slide past the window. The volunteer work at the hospital, the daily routines, the constant, low-grade hum of anxiety about Rebecca's latest crisis, it all fell away, receding into the distance like the skyline in the rearview mirror. In its place was a vast, exhilarating silence, the freedom to make my own decisions, the right to spend my money on myself, the sheer, intoxicating novelty of living without the gravitational pull of my daughter's emotional demands. At the airport, a new kind of peace descended upon me. I moved through security, found my gate, and sat calmly amidst the chaos of travelers. My phone buzzed in my purse, 3 calls from Rebecca in quick succession. Then, a text message lit up the screen. "Mom, you're being ridiculous. The kids are asking about you. Call me." I read the words, a clinical curiosity replacing any emotional response. It was fascinating. Now that I wasn't available at her whim, now that the 24/7 support line was disconnected, my absence was suddenly noted. My existence, so burdensome days ago, was now inconveniently missing. I deleted the message without a reply. The power in that simple action was a drug. The flight to Zurich was long, a 12-hour passage over an ocean and a continent, a physical manifestation of the chasm I was creating. For the first time in years, no one in the world knew where I was. No one could call me to ask for a favor, a loan, or my time. The hum of the jet engines was a lullaby of anonymity. I was untethered, a satellite launched into a new orbit. I took out a journal, a beautiful leather-bound book I had bought for myself in the airport. I began to write, documenting every detail of the past week. The pain, the anger, the cold calculations, the triumphant signatures. I wanted a record of my liberation. I wanted to remember the exact texture of the moment I chose myself. I arrived in Zurich on Tuesday night, local time, my body tired, but my spirit vibrantly awake. As I walked through the gleaming, efficient airport, I saw him, a young man holding a sign that read Johnson. His name was Klaus, and he had a kind, open face and spoke perfect English. "Mrs. Johnson." He greeted me with a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Welcome to Switzerland. I hope you're ready for a new adventure." "More than ready," I replied. And for the first time in weeks, my smile was not a weapon, or a mask, or a plea. It was completely, authentically, joyfully my own. He drove me to a charming, furnished apartment in the heart of Zurich. It was small but immaculate, with large windows that overlooked a manicured park and a sliver of the stunning lake. The air smelled clean, of pine and possibility. "Here is all the information about the city," Klaus said, handing me a thick folder. "Places to eat, activities, German classes, social groups. I've also scheduled a meeting for you with a financial advisor for tomorrow afternoon to help you with the paperwork if you decide to stay permanently." That night, in a bed that was not my own, in a country where I knew no one, I slept. I slept deeply, dreamlessly and peacefully. There was no phone that could ring with a crisis, no one who needed anything from me, no responsibility beyond my own well-being. The silence was not empty. It was full of promise. The great escape was over. The new life had begun. I awoke to the sound of church bells, their melodic chimes weaving through the crisp Swiss air. For a disorienting moment, I didn't know where I was. The light filtering through the unfamiliar window was different, cleaner, sharper. Then, the memory of the previous day washed over me, not as a shock, but as a warm, steadying wave. I was in Zurich. I was free. I dressed with a sense of ceremony, choosing clothes that felt joyful and light, a stark contrast to the armored suit I had worn to the bank. Stepping outside my building, the city greeted me like a lover. The air was cool and carried the scent of fresh bread from a nearby bakery and the clean, mineral tang of the lake. I walked the short distance to the water's edge, my footsteps light on the cobblestones. I found a small cafe with tables perched almost over the lake, the water a stunning, impossible blue. I ordered breakfast, a buttery croissant, a pot of rich coffee, a glass of fresh orange juice, and simply watched the swans glide by. For the first time in decades, I was spending money on a leisurely, luxurious meal for one, without a single calculation of how that money could have been redirected to Rebecca's mortgage, the twins' school supplies, or some other familial emergency. The croissant flaked perfectly onto my plate. The coffee was ambrosia. Every sensation was heightened, a gift to myself. After breakfast, on a whim, I wandered into a boutique and saw it, a silk scarf, the color of a twilight sky, shot through with threads of silver. It cost 100 francs. The old Giulietta would have admired it, then put it back, thinking of 100 practical uses for that money. The new Giulietta didn't hesitate. I bought it simply because it was beautiful and because I could. Tying it around my neck, I felt a flutter of pure, uncomplicated pleasure. As I walked through the pristine streets, my mind, unbidden, began its own accounting. Not of sorrow, but of sheer, staggering value. I mentally calculated the money I had spent on Rebecca in just the last 5 years. The mortgage payments, the braces, the endless stream of gifts, the gas for all those babysitting trips, the groceries I always brought to stock her kitchen. It tallied to at least $50,000. $50,000. The number hung in the clear alpine air. I could have traveled the world. I could have lived without financial fear. Instead, I had given it to a daughter who considered my love a burden and my presence a nuisance. The thought no longer brought pain, only a clarifying, cold finality. At 2:00 the afternoon, I found a bench by the lake, and Saturday I calculated the time difference. It would be 80 amperes. Back home. Elvira would be preparing for her performance. She would be driving to Rebecca's house, the letter burning a hole in her bag. I felt a quiet, focused anticipation. The first domino was about to fall. Right on cue, at 5 p.m. my time, my phone erupted. The screen flashed with Rebecca's name. I let it ring until it stopped. Immediately, it started again. This time, I answered. I wanted to hear the earthquake in her voice. "Mom!" she screamed, her voice cracking with a panic that was music to my ears. "Where are you? Elvira came to the house with a letter from you. She said you've disappeared. What's going on?" I watched a swan dip its elegant head beneath the water, the picture of tranquility. "Hello, Rebecca," I replied, my voice calm and even. "Did you read the letter yet?" "Yes, I read it. Are you crazy? How could you do this to us? Where are you?" "I'm exactly where I need to be," I said, the Swiss mountains a majestic backdrop to my pronouncement. "Far away from you, just as you wanted. But I didn't want this. I didn't want you to actually leave. I was just angry. I didn't mean it." There it was, the classic Rebecca tactic. Minimizing the nuclear bomb she had dropped, reframing her cruelty as a momentary lapse, making me the unreasonable one for reacting to it. "You didn't mean it when you told me that your greatest birthday wish was for me to die," I asked, my tone one of mild curiosity. "Because you sounded pretty convincing." "It was just I was just frustrated. David lost his job again. The kids are giving me problems at school. I'm so stressed. I shouldn't have taken it out on you." "You're right, you shouldn't have. But it's done, and words can't be taken back." "But Mom, please, come back. We need you. I need you." The shift was so transparent it was almost amusing. Now she needed me. Now that she had read the itemized list of everything she was losing, now that the financial scaffolding was being kicked out from under her life. "Do you need me, Rebecca?" I asked, my voice soft but piercing, "or do you need my money?" The silence on the other end of the line was long and telling. "I need you," she finally murmured, but the words were hollow, stripped of all conviction. "Rebecca, for 45 years I lived for you," I said, the truth of it flowing from me like a clear, cold stream. I sacrificed my dreams, my money, my time, my opportunities. And when I finally needed to feel that you loved me and valued me, you told me you'd rather I was dead. Those words broke my heart in a way I will never be able to fix. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. Sorry is not enough, Rebecca. The damage is done. And you know what? Maybe it was the best thing you could have said to me. Because it finally opened my eyes and made me understand that I've been living my life all wrong. What do you mean? I mean that, for the first time in decades, I am living for me, and it feels wonderful. Where are you, Mom? Please tell me, she begged, her voice choked with what sounded like real tears. The kids are asking about their grandma. They don't understand why you haven't come to see them. It was a masterful, if predictable, play. Now the grandchildren missed me. For all those years of canceled plans and expensive gifts, my presence was expected, a given. But my absence? My absence created a vacuum. The kids will be fine, I replied, looking at the majestic Alps in the distance, their peaks touched with pression. Gold by the setting Sunday, they're resilient. What they will learn is that actions have consequences and that hurtful words can destroy relationships forever. But Mom, please, you can't just disappear like this. What if something happens to you? What if you get sick? How will we know? The sudden concern for my well-being was so convenient it was almost laughable. Rebecca, in the last 5 years, I've had 3 episodes of high blood pressure that sent me to the hospital. Do you know how many times you visited me? None. You always had something more important to do. The first time, you had a hair appointment. The second, it was David's birthday. The third, you didn't even answer the phone. So, don't come to me now with concerns about my health. That's not true, she weakly protested. It is true, and you know it. My health was never a priority for you, but my checks were. It's not about the money, she screamed, the facade crumbling. Isn't it? I asked softly. I hung up the phone without waiting for her answer. It immediately rang again, a frantic, buzzing insect. This time, I powered it off completely. The silence that returned was a blessing. I needed peace to savor this, my first true night of freedom. That evening, I went to an elegant restaurant by the lake and dined alone. I ordered the most expensive dish on the menu, salmon with caviar, and drank an entire bottle of French wine. I watched the lights of the city dance on the dark water, toasting the woman I had been and celebrating the woman I was becoming. The food tasted like triumph. The wine tasted like a future I had earned. The silence of a powered-off phone is a profound luxury. For 2 days, I let it rest in a drawer, a dormant relic of a life I was leaving behind. I spent those days exploring Zurich with the wide-eyed wonder of a woman half my age. I enrolled in a beginner's German class, the guttural new sounds a satisfying mental exercise. I joined a hiking group for seniors and climbed a gentle trail in the foothills, the clean air filling my lungs with every purposeful step. I was building a life, brick by joyful brick, and the construction site was blissfully quiet. On Thursday morning, a strange mix of curiosity and closure compelled me to turn the phone back on. It buzzed and chimed for a full minute, a frantic digital seizure. When it finally settled, the screen displayed the tally. 47 missed calls, 23 text messages, all from Rebecca and David. I didn't feel anxiety. I felt like a sociologist observing a fascinating behavioral pattern. I opened the messages and read them in chronological order, watching the evolution of their panic in real time. The first ones were still clothed in emotional concern. Please, Mom, answer. We're so worried. Rebecca Julieta, please let us know you're safe. David then, as the hours ticked by without a response, the tone shifted to threat. If you don't answer, we're going to call the police. Rebecca message 10. We already called the police. They said there's nothing they can do because you left a letter explaining your departure. David, the admission in message 10 was delicious. They had tried to use the authorities to reel me back in and had failed. My meticulous planning had outmaneuvered them. Then came the true heart of the matter, the mask of concern falling away to reveal the raw financial nerve underneath. Message 15. The bank called us. You canceled the joint account. How are we going to pay for emergencies? Rebecca message 20. You don't understand what you're doing. You're going to ruin us. David, it was beautiful. The concern for my well-being had evaporated, replaced by pure, unadulterated panic over the financial implications of my absence. The subtext of every message was now clear. Our safety net is gone. Our problem solver has resigned. Our wallet is closed. I decided to answer just one message. A single flare shot back into their chaos. I typed calmly, I'm fine. I'm exactly where I need to be. Don't look for me. The response came in less than 5 minutes, a frantic, revealing explosion from Rebecca. You don't understand what you're doing. You're going to ruin us. The mortgage lawyer called us. He says you can take our house. There it was, the unvarnished truth. She wasn't worried that I might be sick, suffering, or in danger. She was terrified because she had finally understood the price tag attached to my love, and the bill was now due. I typed my final response to that thread, my fingers steady and sure. Now you understand what it's worth to have me in your life. Too bad you realized it too late. That afternoon, I had my meeting with the Swiss financial advisor, Herr Meyer. He was an older gentleman with impeccable English and a demeanor of unshakable competence. In his orderly office, with its view of the financial district, we spoke openly about my finances for the first time without the shadow of Rebecca's needs darkening every calculation. With your current savings and your American pension, he explained, pointing to neat columns of numbers, you can live very comfortably here for the rest of your life. Switzerland has excellent medical care programs for retired foreigners, and the quality of life is exceptional. It was liberating. We discussed my future, my comfort, my desires. For the first time, my financial planning was an act of self-love, not self-sacrifice. You can also invest part of your savings in the Swiss economy, Herr Meyer continued. The returns are stable and secure. In 5 years, you could significantly increase your assets if you invest wisely. Increase my assets. The phrase was a revelation. My money could grow for me. Is there anything else I should know? I asked. He smiled, a gentle, understanding look in his eyes. We have many clients in situations similar to yours. Older people who have come to Switzerland looking for a new start after complicated family relationships. You are not alone in this experience, Mrs. Johnson. His words were a balm. I wasn't a monster. I wasn't an anomaly. I was part of a quiet migration of those who had chosen their own happiness over the toxic demands of their families. The next morning, I joined my new hiking group. On the bus ride to the trailhead, I sat next to a woman named Ingrid, a 7-1-year-old from Germany with a firm handshake and lively eyes. What brought you to Switzerland? She asked me as we admired the passing landscape of lush green valleys and quaint villages. I had decided to stop sugarcoating my truth. A daughter who told me that her greatest birthday wish was for me to die. I answered plainly. Ingrid's eyes widened, not in judgment, but in stark recognition. Seriously? Completely seriously. After I financed her house, practically raised her children, and sacrificed my retirement for her, she told me my presence was an unbearable burden. My goodness, Ingrid murmured. And what did you do? I disappeared from her life, and here I am. Ingrid smiled, a look of deep admiration on her face. You are very brave. It took me 5 years to make the decision to walk away from my toxic family. My son and daughter-in-law treated me like an ATM with legs. As we hiked, we shared our stories. She told me of the guilt that had consumed her, the accusations of being a selfish mother when she finally set boundaries. I realized my children never wondered if I was happy, she confessed, pausing to catch her breath with a view of a sparkling lake below. They never asked if I had enough money for my own needs. They only cared about what I could give them. That's not love, Julieta, that's exploitation. Her words resonated in the deepest part of my soul. For decades, I had confused emotional manipulation with filial love. I had mistaken constant demands for genuine need. I had been exploited, and I had called it motherhood. That night, I turned on my phone, one last time. 62 missed calls, 47 text messages. I read the new batch, observing the final, desperate evolution. They had become aggressive, then pathetic. This is ridiculous, Mom. You're ruining our lives over a tantrum. Act like an adult and come back. Rebecca, I called all the hospitals, the police, your friends. No one knows where you are. If something happens to you, it's going to be my fault. Please just tell me you're okay. David, it was fascinating. At no point was there a genuine, unqualified apology for the cruelty. No acknowledgement of the deep, personal wound. It all revolved around the negative consequences for them. I typed my final message, a closing statement for the court of our relationship. I am perfectly fine and happier than I have been in years. What you are experiencing now are the natural consequences of your actions. I hope this experience helps you understand the value of the people you love before it's too late with others in your life. Her response was immediate, a last, grasping clutch at the void. Please, Mom, we can fix this. I promise I'll never say horrible things again. Just come back. I wrote my final words to her, the epitaph for a daughter who no longer existed in my world. Empty promises don't mend broken hearts. Rebecca, the words you said to me revealed what you really think of me. You can't take that truth back with desperate promises. After I sent it, I went into the phone settings. I blocked her number. I blocked David's number. I blocked every unknown number that had tried to call. The action was not one of anger, but of peace. It was time to close the book, not just set it aside. The true colors had been revealed, and they were not pretty. But in their stark, honest light, I could finally see the path to my own future, and it was dazzlingly bright. The piece of my new life was a delicate, precious thing, and for several weeks I guarded it fiercely. My German vocabulary grew, my watercolor landscapes became less muddy, and the faces in my book club became those of friends. I had almost begun to believe the storm had passed, that Rebecca had finally accepted the new, unbreachable border I had drawn. But a predator, when starving, does not slink away. It becomes more desperate, more dangerous. It was on a pristine Thursday morning, as I sat in my favorite lakeside cafe, that the international call came. The number was unfamiliar, but it had a U.S. country code. A cold finger of premonition traced my spine. I answered, my voice cautious. Mrs. Julieta Johnson? A female voice, professional and American, inquired. Yes, this is she. Who's calling? My name is Sarah Williams. I'm a social worker in the Family Services Department in your hometown. The blood in my veins seemed to turn to ice. I'm calling because we've received a complaint about your well-being. The world tilted. The sparkling lake, the cheerful clatter of the cafe, it all receded into a muffled hum. A complaint? I managed, my voice tight. What kind of complaint? Your daughter, Rebecca Johnson, filed a report alleging that you may be suffering from dementia or significant cognitive decline. She states that you've made sudden, rash financial and life decisions that put you at risk. According to her, you disappeared suddenly and are likely living in precarious conditions abroad. I couldn't breathe. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it. The ultimate betrayal. Not content with wishing me dead, she was now trying to legally annihilate my personhood. She was attempting to paint me as a doddering, incompetent fool, to invalidate my choices and drag me back into her orbit, where she could regain control of my mind and my money. Rage, cold and pure, washed over the initial shock. Miss Williams, I replied, my voice firm, each word chiseled from ice. I do not suffer from dementia or cognitive decline. I am living in Switzerland by my own choice, in a comfortable apartment with excellent medical care, and I am in perfect mental health. My daughter's allegations are completely false. I understand your position, Mrs. Johnson, she said, her tone carefully neutral. But we are obligated to verify your well-being. Would it be possible to coordinate a medical and psychological evaluation through the American consulate in Zurich? Of course, I replied without a moment's hesitation. The fight was here, and I would meet it head-on. I am willing to undergo any evaluation that demonstrates I am in perfect mental health and that my decisions have been made with complete lucidity. After coordinating the details, I hung up, my hand trembling not with fear, but with a fury so profound it was almost serene. She had crossed a line from which there was no return. This was no longer a family dispute. This was a declaration of war. I immediately called Anel. His voice was a welcome anchor in the sudden tempest. Julieta, he greeted, his tone laced with uncharacteristic gravity. I'm glad to hear your voice. I've had a very interesting week with your daughter. I bet you have, I said, the words sharp. I just got off the phone with social services. Rebecca is accusing me of having dementia. That's not all. Anel sighed, a sound of deep frustration. She also hired a lawyer to try and challenge all the legal changes you made before you left. She's alleging you weren't in your right mind when you signed them. Can she do that? I asked, a sliver of the old fear trying to pierce my armor. She can try, Anel said, his voice hardening, but she doesn't have a legal leg to stand on. I have detailed recordings of all our conversations where you demonstrate total lucidity and clear intent. Furthermore, the fact that you meticulously planned your departure and are living independently in Switzerland completely contradicts any allegation of cognitive decline. What else is she doing? She tried to access your bank accounts, alleging concern for your well-being. The personal bank, thankfully, denied her. She also wanted to stop the process of reclaiming the house, but since everything is legally airtight, and she herself signed documents acknowledging David's job loss, she has no valid arguments. It was incredible. The lengths she was willing to go to claw back the financial benefits she had so carelessly lost. Anel, I said, my voice dropping to a determined whisper. I want you to prepare a defamation lawsuit against my daughter. Her false allegations about my mental state could severely impact my reputation and my legal rights here. It would be my genuine pleasure, Julieta, Anel replied. a note of grim satisfaction in his voice. "After seeing how she has treated you, I think it's well past time for her to face the legal consequences of her actions." 2 days later, I walked into the American consulate in Zurich, my head held high. The evaluation was exhaustive: a physical exam, a battery of cognitive tests, and a long, probing psychological interview. The American doctor, a seasoned man in his 60s, was thorough and perceptive. After 3 hours, he sat back, a look of respect on his face. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, "not only are you in perfect mental health for your age, but the decisions you have made demonstrate admirable lucidity and courage. Your planning, your foresight, your understanding of complex financial and legal matters, these are not the actions of someone with cognitive decline. Your daughter is clearly trying to manipulate the system to recover financial benefits. That will be officially documented in my report." Relief, potent and sweet, flooded through me. "Thank you, doctor. Absolutely. I'll send a detailed report to social services explaining that her allegations are completely unfounded and that you are living an independent, healthy, and well-adjusted life." That same afternoon, my phone rang. It was Sarah Williams, the social worker. "Mrs. Johnson, we have received the medical report from the consulate. It is unequivocal. Your daughter's allegations are baseless. We are closing the case immediately and will be notifying Rebecca that her complaint was unfounded." "Thank you," I replied, a weight lifting from my soul. "Will this be on some kind of record?" "Yes, it will be documented that she filed a false complaint regarding a family member's well-being, which could have legal implications if she repeats this behavior." Perfect. Rebecca had not only failed spectacularly in her attempt to invalidate my freedom, but she had now branded herself, in an official capacity, as someone who would weaponize the system against her own mother. The ultimate betrayal had boomeranged, leaving a permanent mark on the perpetrator. That night, I did not celebrate. I sat on my balcony, looking out at the quiet, orderly city, and I mourned. I mourned the absolute death of the relationship. There was no coming back from this. Her actions had proven, more definitively than any words, that she saw me not as a person, but as a possession. And when that possession had dared to have a will of its own, she had tried to have it declared legally insane. The battle was won, but the war had cost me a daughter. And in the cold, clear light of the Swiss stars, I finally accepted that it was a price I was willing to pay for my own sanity, my freedom, and my soul. The victory over the false dementia claim left me with a profound and settled calm, a quiet that echoed through the halls of my new Swiss life. The last, most desperate weapon in Rebecca's arsenal had been fired, and it had misfired, wounding only her. The official documentation from the consulate was more than a medical report. It was a shield, a permanent legal and psychological barrier that would protect my autonomy from any future assault. With that battle decisively won, my existence in Zurich began to feel not like a temporary escape, but like a true and lasting home. The sharp, righteous anger that had fueled my exodus softened into a quiet, unshakable confidence. I had been tested in the most intimate and brutal way, and I had not broken. I had been reforged. 6 months had slipped by in a peaceful rhythm of German classes, watercolor lessons, and hikes with my new circle of friends. I was living, breathing proof that it is never too late to build a beautiful life from the ashes of an old one. The sharp pang of loss for the daughter I thought I had was now a dull, manageable ache, a scar rather than an open wound. It was on a perfect spring morning, with the Alps standing stark and white against a cloudless sky, that my phone rang. It was Elvira. Her voice, crackling with transatlantic excitement, pulled me from my easel where I was attempting to capture the delicate light on the lake. "Julieta, you have to hear this," she said, not even bothering with a hello. "Rebecca lost the house." The words landed not with a crash but with a soft, final thud, the sound of a last domino falling in a chain I had set in motion a lifetime ago. Despite everything, a primal, maternal flicker of concern sparked for my grandchildren, a reflex that years of conditioning could not entirely erase. "What exactly happened?" I asked, setting down my paintbrush, the half-finished landscape suddenly forgotten. "The bank foreclosed on the mortgage last week," Elvira said, her voice a mix of grim satisfaction and shared outrage. "David couldn't find a stable job, nothing that paid what he was used to. They fell behind on the payments, and since you're the co-signer and were actively exercising your legal rights, the bank proceeded with the foreclosure. There was no one to swoop in and save them this time. No emergency fund to raid, no pension to borrow against." I walked to my balcony, the phone pressed to my ear, and looked out at the unbothered serenity of Zurich. The orderly streets, the clean air, the palpable sense of calm, it was a world away from the chaos that had finally consumed their lives. And the kids? Are they all right? The question was necessary, a tribute to the grandmother I still was, even to children I might never see again. "They're fine, they're fine," Elvira reassured me, though her tone was anything but sympathetic toward Rebecca. "They moved to a small apartment on the other side of town. It's a far cry from that showplace you bought them. David finally got a job in a factory. It's stable, I'll give him that, but the pay is a fraction of his old salary. Rebecca had to go back to work, too. Full-time. No more leisurely lunches or relying on mom's subsidies." A complex tapestry of emotions unfolded within me. I felt no joy, no schadenfreude in their suffering, but I did feel a deep, resonant sense of justice, a cosmic balancing of the scales. For the first time in their adult lives, Rebecca and David were experiencing the unsoftened consequences of their own decisions and attitudes. The safety net I had woven with my own flesh, my time, and my financial future was gone, and they had hit the hard ground of reality. They were finally living in the world they had claimed to want, a world without my interference, without my suffocating presence. The irony was as perfect as it was tragic. "Is there anything else?" I asked, my voice quiet, my gaze fixed on a swan gliding effortlessly on the lake below. "Rebecca came to me yesterday," Elvira continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Crying hysterically. A real performance, though this time I think the tears were from genuine panic. She asked me if I knew how to contact you. She said she wants to genuinely apologize, that she finally understands everything she lost when she lost you." I could almost see the scene, the dramatic tears, the desperation born not of true remorse for her cruelty, but of the stark, frightening reality of her new circumstances. The apology was a key she was trying to forge to unlock the vault she had so carelessly thrown away. "And what did you tell her?" I asked, already knowing I could trust Elvira's instincts completely. "I told her that some wounds are too deep to heal, and that some words can never be taken back." Elvira's voice was firm, unwavering. "I also told her that you are flourishing in your new life, and that it's probably best for both of you that she doesn't try to contact you, that she needs to live with the life she chose." She was right. The peace I had built was hard-won, a delicate ecosystem of self-respect and hard-won happiness. I would not risk it for the hollow echoes of an apology that was 6 months and a foreclosure too late. An apology that, I was certain, was for the loss of the financial benefits, not for the wish that I were dead. Later that afternoon, as if summoned by the turning of this new page, my lawyer, Annelle, called. Julieta, I have some interesting news, he began, his tone brisk and businesslike, the sound of a man closing a file. Rebecca's house has been sold by the bank. As the co-signer, you have the right to recover your initial investment of $150,000 plus the accumulated interest from the sale. The numbers, which had once represented my greatest folly and the depth of my misguided love, now represented a stunning reversal. It was not just money, it was vindication. How much is that in total? I asked, my heart beginning to beat a little faster, not with greed, but with the sheer poetic justice of it. $185,000, he stated clearly. The bank has already approved the transfer. The money will be in your Swiss account next week. I was silent for a moment, absorbing the magnitude of it. Not only had I escaped, not only had I reclaimed my life and my sanity, but I was now being financially rewarded for my courage. The money I had given up for lost, the retirement I had sacrificed, returning to me with interest. It felt like a dividend from the universe for the most difficult but most important decision I had ever made, the decision to choose myself. There's also something else, Anel continued, a note of satisfaction in his voice. Your apartment back here has finally sold. After commissions and expenses, the net amount is $95,000. The numbers tumbled in my head, a waterfall of reclaimed freedom. $185,000 from the house, $95,000 from my apartment. Together with the savings I had already withdrawn and the money I was no longer hemorrhaging to Rebecca's bottomless pit of needs, my total net worth was being transformed before my eyes. I was receiving nearly $300,000 in assets I had mentally and emotionally written off. The ledger of my life, once so bleak, was now showing a staggering profit. Thank you, Anel, I said, the words imbued with a gratitude that went far beyond legal fees. For everything. For believing me, for fighting for me. It was my honor, Julieta. He replied, his voice softening. Truly. Now, enjoy your life. You've earned it in every sense of the word. That night, I returned to my favorite restaurant by the lake. I did not go with a large group, but alone, as I had on my first night of freedom. I ordered a glass of French champagne, the bubbles dancing in the crystal flute like 1,000 tiny celebrations. I raised the glass in a silent toast. To the brave woman who had the courage to start over when everything seemed lost. To the ledger of a lifetime, whose final balance was now, irrevocably, in my favor. As I dined on exquisite food, watching the lights of the city twinkle on the dark water, I thought of the entire painful journey. I had started as a broken, humiliated mother, shattered by the cruel words of an ungrateful daughter in the house I had bought for her. Now, I was an independent woman, financially secure, surrounded by genuine friends, and living a life of purpose and beauty on my own terms. The house of cards that was Rebecca's entitled existence, a structure built entirely on the foundation of my sacrifice, had finally collapsed. And from the rubble, I had not only walked away unscathed, but I had emerged richer, wiser, and finally, completely and gloriously free. The fall of their house had cemented the foundation of my own. The return of my money was more than a financial restoration. It was the universe's final, unequivocal seal of approval on my decision. The $185,000, followed by the $95,000 from my apartment sale, felt less like a simple transfer of funds and more like a transfusion of strength and validation. With my net worth now securely and comfortably over $500,000, a profound, unassailable sense of security settled deep within my bones. The ghost of fear that had haunted me for years, the specter of a destitute, lonely old woman, cast aside and forgotten, was finally exercised. I was not just safe. I was thriving, my life a testament to the prosperity that can follow principle. But as the initial euphoria of financial victory subsided, a new restlessness began to stir within me. My personal battle was won, my peace was secured. Yet, the memory of the pain, the shocking, gut-wrenching isolation I had felt standing in Rebecca's living room, lingered in quiet moments. I thought of Elvira's unwavering support, of Ingrid's shared story on that hiking trail, of Herr Meyer's offhand comment about his many clients in similar situations. A powerful realization dawned. I was not an anomaly. I was a survivor of a silent, shame-filled epidemic, one that thrived in the shadows of family homes and was sanctified by the twisted rhetoric of filial duty. One evening, staring at the leather-bound journal where I had so meticulously documented my escape, I knew with sudden clarity what I had to do. My pain could have a purpose far beyond my own healing. It could be a beacon for other women lost in the same dark wood of familial exploitation, women who believed their suffering was a required part of motherhood. I would write a book, not just a memoir, but a manifesto and a manual, a declaration of war on the toxic, soul-crushing notion that a mother's love must be synonymous with self-destruction. I spent a week researching before I contacted a Swiss publisher, a small but highly respected firm known for its thoughtful works on self-help and personal growth. The editor, a sharp, compassionate woman in her 50s named Bridget, agreed to meet me for coffee. In a sunlit cafe, I gave her the condensed, unvarnished version of my story, the birthday wish, the financial audit, the legal reckoning, the escape. When I finished, she didn't offer empty pity. She leaned forward, her eyes alight with a fierce intellectual conviction. "Julieta," she said, her voice low and intense, "your story touches on a topic that affects millions of women but is rarely discussed with this level of honesty and courage. The emotional and financial abuse by adult children is a quiet epidemic. It's a form of domestic violence that society condones with a sigh and a 'what can you do?' It needs a voice. It needs your voice. The clarity and strength in your telling, it's exactly what's needed." Her words were a spark to tinder. For the next 3 months, I wrote with a focus and discipline I hadn't known since my most demanding days as a nurse. The book, which we titled When Love Hurts, Freeing Yourself from Family Emotional Abuse After 70, was deliberately structured to be more than my story. It was a practical guide, a lifeline. I divided it into sections, recognizing the patterns, which detailed the warning signs of manipulation and entitlement, the reckoning, which guided readers through the painful but necessary process of financial and emotional auditing, the escape plan, with concrete steps for legal and financial disentanglement, and finally, the reclamation, focused on rebuilding one's life, self-worth, and joy. I wove in my own experiences with the mortgage, the will, the escape to Switzerland, not as tales of revenge, but as empowering case studies in clear-eyed, courageous decision-making. The book was published 8 months later. The response was not just positive, it was a dam-breaking. It first became a quiet bestseller in Germany and Switzerland, then gained traction across Europe, and soon, letters and emails began to arrive from North and South America, from Australia, from everywhere. My story, it seemed, was the secret story of countless women who had been suffering in dignified, desperate silence. At Bridget's urging, I agreed to a video interview for the publisher's popular YouTube channel. The morning of the taping, I felt a nervous energy, but it was clean and purposeful. I sat before the camera in my Zurich apartment, the stunning lake and Alps visible through the window behind me, a visual representation of the peace that was possible. I spoke not from a script, but from the heart. I spoke of love that had been twisted into obligation, of sacrifice that had been mistaken for virtue, of the immense, soul-freeing courage it takes to choose yourself, when every ingrained instinct and societal pressure tells you it's the ultimate selfishness. The interview went viral. The comments and emails that flooded the publisher's website and my new, professional email address were a heartbreaking, validating chorus. They were a global catalog of pain and recognition. I read your book and finally told my 40-year-old son he has to move out and get a job. He called me a selfish monster and hasn't spoken to me since. But for the first time in 20 years, I can breathe in my own home. Thank you. Maria, Spain. Your story helped me understand that true love does not require self-destruction. I have stopped funding my daughter's extravagant vacations and started using my savings to finally see the world myself. I am in Rome as I write this, and I thought of you. Carmen, Mexico. After reading your book, I sold the big house I couldn't afford and moved to a small apartment. The silence is no longer lonely, it is peaceful. For the first time in years, I sleep through the night. Rosa, Argentina. But one letter, forwarded to me by Bridget a full year after the book's release, moved me more than any bestseller list or glowing review. It was from a young woman named Andrea. Dear Mrs. Johnson, I am 30 years old, and I have a 65-year-old mother who has sacrificed her whole life for me and my siblings. After reading your book, I realized with horror that we are treating her exactly like Rebecca treated you. We call her only when we need money or a babysitter. We dismiss her dreams and her time, acting as if her life should be an endless resource for ours. Your story opened my eyes to the toxic pattern I was perpetuating, a pattern that could have destroyed my relationship with my mother forever. Yesterday, I called my mom and apologized for all the years of taking her for granted. I told her I want to help her fulfill her own dreams instead of expecting her to always be available for mine. We are planning a trip together, just the two of us, for the first time ever. Thank you for helping me understand this before it was too late. You saved our relationship. With eternal gratitude, Andrea. I read the letter 3 times, tears of a kind I had never known before streaming freely down my face. They were not tears of pain, or of loss, or of rage. They were tears of profound, healing, transcendent joy. My journey through hell had not only freed me, it had helped heal another family. It had prevented another daughter from becoming a Rebecca, and another mother from ever feeling the bottomless depth of my despair. My pain had been alchemized into a protective shield for others, my story a vaccination against a familial plague. In that moment, my liberation was complete. It had transcended my own experience and become a legacy. The silent, sacrificing mother had found her voice, and in using it, she had started a chorus of liberation for women around the world. The little girl I had once been, the one who dreamed of being a nurse and making a real difference in the world, had finally done so. Not through a grand career or great wealth, but through the raw, honest, unflinching sharing of her own broken heart, and the magnificent, hopeful story of how she had gathered the pieces and, with unwavering courage, put it back together, piece by glorious, triumphant piece. Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoyed this one, you won't want to miss these. Just click to watch and don't forget to subscribe.